David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience.
Joe Darlington from Being James Bond.
Wow, that was so enthusiastic. You know why Joe's excited? Because this is a vlog that really had birth on a car ride.
Yep.
You remember it?
Yep.
We were driving down to Washington, and Joe actually brought up the subject. He goes, you know, it's kind of interesting, you know, arguably, every Bond actor, if you take every Bond actor and look at their very first Bond film, it's arguably their best. And we said, let's put it to the test. Mm-hmm. Let's watch the 6 Bond films that would be associated with that and test the theory. So we are in front of Live and Let Die. You can see over here, trespassers will be eaten. All right, so you know we're doing this. This is Roger Moore's very first film. All right, so first time you saw this film, what were your impressions?
It was okay.
Honest?
Yeah, I remember it was funny because I remember I got into, obviously Roger Moore was my Bond.
Yes.
You know, I was of that age.
Mine too. We're the same age.
Yeah. So like in my early teenage years, it was For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy, and I really got into those films. And it was funny. I really saw them at the time as kind of hardcore spy films.
Yeah.
You know, even the little things like the Tarzan yell and the things like that, they kind of sort of got past me. That I kind of almost didn't. It was almost like a dog whistle.
That's a Bond film.
Yeah, I sort of almost tuned them out.
Exactly.
And just sort of focused on like the realistic aspects of it. And then I was like, well, I got to see the earlier stuff now. This is when I was getting the bug. Well, I watched Live and Let Die, and I was like, okay, all right, it's good. You know, and there's a lot to like about it, and I do like this film. It is a great, it's a good Bond film. I think when I first saw it, it took a little, and it probably sort of, you know, it was a little disposable at the time, but I've definitely learned to appreciate a lot about it, and it definitely has that aspect of being timely.
Yeah.
So when you're a teenager in the '80s watching what was kind of hip in the early '70s, you're like, oh, okay. Well, that was then.
All right, so you're bringing up a very important fact, and I think everybody watching can appreciate this. Your entry into Bond is all important in determining what you like. And I'll tell you why I say this. My very, very, very first Bond film that I ever saw, I was in Atlantic City on a vacation with my entire family, and we saw The Spy Who Loves Me. And I remember seeing it and obviously loving it. And my dad said, you know, there's other Bond films. And it was just like this eye-opening moment for me. And then I remember shortly thereafter, in whatever capacity it was, seeing Live and Let Die. Maybe it was on TV at the time. Maybe it was a rerun. I don't know. I'm a revisionist, so who knows what really happened. But I have to tell you something. And this is good, because we shouldn't be in agreement about everything. Should be point, counterpoint. I love Live and Let Die.
Okay.
Not appreciate. I love it. And I'll tell you why I do. I remember seeing Spy Who Loves Me, which to many people, if not almost everyone, is Roger Moore's greatest. You know, they really love that. They think it's the perfect movie.
Yeah.
To me, even today, Live and Let Die, it was Roger Moore's first entry, and he was kind of a no-shit guy. I mean, he had, obviously, his lover boy moments that we've come to appreciate. He had his kind of wisecracks. But there were some really serious, dire moments. I'm going to even say scary moments of trepidation. I thought that when he was in certain situations, it wasn't comical in the way that he escapes them. He shows himself very capable, very learned. They actually showed some of Bond's lifestyle, you know, behind the scenes thing, which when do you ever get to see that? I loved his interaction with M. I mean, I could literally go through all the characteristics to which I weigh, this is why I love this Bond movie, and it starts to check off all the points.
You know, it's interesting you're saying that too, because I kind of feel like you're sort of, it's like the theory that we were talking about the first film starting things off. This is kind of Dr. No-esque in that respect, where there's a lot of traits that you see here that sort of go forward. And I've actually sort of had that feel. I've always thought about this film that it does have, and I wonder if it was intentional, there were some Dr. No moments in this.
Oh.
You know, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's got Quarrel Jr., it's got the Jamaican setting, it's got, instead of the tarantula, we've got the snake. I mean, there's a couple little moments, little beats here that do sort of have that Dr. No feel.
And I think there were even, dare I say, and I don't think anybody really talks about this, there were some Connery moments that Moore adopted. And I know there's lots of interviews where he said he made it his own, and he did. I think he became more I think it became Roger Moore's James Bond later in the later movies.
Yes.
But this one, there was a lot of Connery-esque type things. The way he acted, the way he connected.
Yeah.
Some of it was written, by the way. Some of it was storyline. I do love little moments, and I think this was Connery's era, where he refers to other agents. Even when they show the agent getting killed, and he goes, "Oh, Baines, I did like Baines, like we shared the same bootmaker."
Right.
Those types of things. But then you had like all of a sudden a Roger Moore moment, even when he kills the snake. It's like Connery's whacking the spider. He burns the snake, and then he goes,
Yep.
I mean, that to me is more, but it's also not like driving through the desert listening to
Right.
or the Tarzan yell, which is world famous.
Sure, there you go. It is interesting, and it's funny too, because like you said, they do in some ways try to make this the non-Connery. Like he's drinking bourbon, no ice, instead of a martini. He's smoking cigars instead of cigarettes.
Yeah.
So they do try to kind of make this Roger Moore's own thing.
Yes.
But you're right, they do, the things that they pick, the Bond-esque things that they pick and run with, and the things that they add to it to make it Moore's, it does make it a pretty interesting cocktail.
It does. It starts to integrate. And by the way, we always talk about the look of Bond and everything. And I think there were some very Connery-esque moments, obviously, when Roger Moore's all dressed in black, which we know Danielle Craig obviously then accepted for the poster and Spectre. It's very cool. But that is that Connery outfit from Thunderball, kind of that all black, like sneaking around, Palmyra type outfit. And then his suits and his coats and, the Chesterfield coats and everything.
Yeah.
I do think Roger Moore gets smacked around the head a lot for his fashion, even though it was a sign of the times. They had giant lapels that were the size of wings. Yeah. In this movie, though, he looked like Bond. He looked the part.
Sure. It's funny. The thing that keeps going around in my head as we're talking, when you say that this was like your first or your second experience with Bond, it really does. And you came from The Spy Who Loved Me and then went to this one. I really do believe that the people's first Bond movies, that's the lens through which you watch all the Bond films going forward.
Totally.
It's almost like you can't shake that first feeling when you met Bond for the first time.
Yes.
I mean, that's why it's so funny. Sometimes when I'm talking to people and they like this one, they hate that one, was Moonraker your first Bond? Yes. And that's like, there's the Moonraker Bond guys, and God bless. If I was just a little bit older, if I get into Bond just a little younger, Moonraker would have been my first one, and my whole vision, my whole outlook on Bond could be completely different.
We know people very well. I mean, you're very good friends with an individual who loves Diamonds Are Forever. She loves Diamonds Are Forever. She's written about it in her book, for goodness sakes.
Yep.
So, but that was her first one. So it's almost like that when you have your spouse, your significant other, and you think back to that first time you had a really amazing experience with them or you met them. Yeah. Those are the ones that you hold on to when you're yelling at each other to stay with them.
Sure.
All right. So we've got to talk about the bad guy in Live and Let Die, because we talked about Dr. No, we talked a little bit about Blofeld in Honor Majesty's Secret Service, but very lightly. But you've got Kananga, you got Mr. Big. What did you think about him as a Bond bad guy?
It's interesting. I love the concept. I love the idea that he is essentially playing two parts. He's the diplomat over here and the gangster over here. And he's essentially running two separate wings. It's almost like two departments of defense. Like I have my minions over here and I got my armies over here. Like he's gonna, one way or another, he's gonna get the whole kit and caboodle. And it's a great idea. The mask is a little weird. I remember.
The makeup is
the makeup is a little wonky, and I'll never forget kind of watching that, going like, why does Kananga have that stuff on his face? Like, I mean, I mean, you knew it was him. I mean, it was as bad as Clark Kent just putting on glasses. Oh my God, it's a whole different guy. But I like the whole concept of it. And I like him. I like the actor. I mean, he really does a great job.
He's amazing. Yeah, agreed. And I like him as a bad guy because what I look for in my Bond bad guys is this. Like, he's maniacal, he's over the top, and then he's like really kind of sweet and appreciative, and then it's like, oh, what the hell? Right, He should be like a crazy person. Yeah. And there are times when he's like, oh, Mr. Bond, I like you so much. And and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to kill you. And he takes the knife and he's like, where the hell did this come from?
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like he's a very dangerous character. When you get to the things like, I love the movie Tomorrow Never Dies. The bad guy, Carver, not so much. So I think this one is indelible. And it also brings us to some of the other supporting characters. Like, what did you think of Solitaire as a Bond girl?
Oh,
how'd she hold up?
Spectacular. And also, by the way, this is also one of the rare instances, maybe not so rare, but one of the few instances where I would say I like how the film handled it better than the book. In the book, she's very on the nose, a woman in trouble.
Okay.
She's literally sending signals to him, like right out of the gate, like, get me out of here. This one is much more nuanced.
Right.
Seems pretty comfortable in her position, not perfectly happy or anything, but kind of just knows that she needs to play her cards, pun not intended. So yeah, I really like how she is in this. She's a much more nuanced character than the novel. Jane Seymour is obviously beautiful. And she's probably like in her early 20s in this. She's a kid. But boy, she's gorgeous. The costumes are awesome. Everything that she's wearing, whether it's the totally big made up stuff, the voodoo stuff that she's wearing, to the casual wear that she's wearing later on, she's always looking terrific.
She looks the part.
Yeah.
She looks the mustard. And by the way, Jane Seymour is still beautiful. We have a good friend of ours, Harris Thomas, who just met her and says...
It's still stunning.
Knockout, gorgeous. Yeah. And she is. So I agree with you. What I liked also about her is she goes through this arc. She's very puritanical. She's very... You almost think that there's an incredible amount of loyalty there, but then she sees the abuse, the entrapment.
Yes.
You hear about her mother going through a similar situation. It's almost like what they did with Olga Kryenko, where they showed this kind of like family, here's what's happening, being abused.
Yes.
And then suddenly, Bond's not just sleeping with her.
Yeah.
There's a connection there. And I don't know if it's Roger Moore's acting. I'll say it is. I'll give him credit. But there's something that it almost he becomes paternal, protective. When they're running through the poppy fields, he's not trying to save, excuse my language, a piece of ass. He's trying to save an individual that he's created a connection with. And I like that I don't know if they did that on purpose, but they played with it, I think, in a very specific way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They definitely knew, Fleming is sort of notorious for his winged dove characters, the women who are in trouble and are damaged in some way, and Bond swoops in to play the rescuer. So they definitely play that up here, and it works.
Yeah.
And there's even a great moment. I love that when they're leaving, getting onto the train, and Felix Leiter says, "Well, what are you going to do on the train for 8 hours, whatever?"
Yeah.
And Bond just sort of looks at him. You know what the joke is. The nuance is that they're going to just have sex for however many hours.
Right.
Then they cut to them on the train playing cards. So there is actually, as kind of naughty parts as there are on one part, there's an innocence to it too.
Yes.
Which I think is part of what you're talking about. How there's also that sort of nurturing, fatherly sort of relationship.
And I didn't feel the aggression. It was interesting when Bond calls out Rosie Carver.
But you couldn't. You wouldn't. Not after what we just done.
I certainly wouldn't have killed you before.
And says, I know who you are, you're a lie, a cheat, a thief, and all these different things. That's when he becomes aggressive with her, not beforehand. So when he turns the tide and says, you're my enemy now, that's the aggression.
Yeah.
With Sean Connery, his Bond was like, friend or foe, I'm going to be aggressive sensually with you. You're going to get the same guy, baby.
Yes.
By the way, one thing we absolutely have to cover, because I still listen to it, I don't want to say on a daily basis because that would seem really ooky. The Bond score. The score in this... what did you think of the music?
The music is absolutely spectacular. It's something... It goes with the times, but it's also timeless. Some of the scores, of the scores were a moment in time where this was catchy, this was popular. Yes. Some will do that to some extent, but yet still have a sort of timelessness to it, and I think this is one.
Well, funny you say that. So John Williams, who is he does the James Bond radio show, when they talk about musicality, he just did a great podcast that talked about The Spy Who Loves Me, and it's a sign of the times because Marvin Hamlish did like a disco beat. And you actually hear interviews of Marvin Hamlish saying disco, disco. To me, Live and Let Die was I could listen to it today and I would be incredibly happy for it
Yes.
being in a Bond film.
Yeah.
You know, when Bond is in the hang glider and he goes, that's like music that really
Yeah.
represents the action of the movie.
Yes.
And then, of course, you've got Live and Let Die as the title theme. I mean, my gosh, what
Right?
Paul McCartney put together?
Oh my God! I mean,
That
that's
rock.
that song could come out tomorrow and still be as spectacular as it was. I mean, that's
We need that.
wow. Yeah.
We
I mean,
need-
and again, such a great song. Again, interesting how they broke free. You know, another way that I think they were trying to break free from Connery's shadow,
Right.
and try to say this is our own thing by getting an artist who's very much modern, very much a rock score. It's like almost like a rock disco sort of hybrid sort of
yeah,
a thing.
you're right.
And yeah, I mean they really did sort of make it their own.
They
And this
took a
was
huge chance,
that-
by the way.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to do something like this. I mean, when the first time I heard Chris Cornell's, opening from Casino Royale, it was almost like, oh, it's fantastic. I love it. But of course, because Paul McCartney already,
Yeah.
broke the ground.
Right, exactly, yeah. Right, very, very similar idea. I mean, they could have played it safe and just dug up Shirley Bassey and said,
Yes.
we need to make it to be very Bondish because it's a new guy. No, they said, we're going to do something different and it pays off.
Now we have to talk about an interesting subject. So this was the 70s. It was during we did not coin this phrase, Blaxploitation films.
Yeah.
Okay, where it was about empowerment as well as exploitation, kind of being married together, and it was actually in a movement, in a very strong movement. It actually saw some great positive effects. It also has some very cringe-worthy moments in filmmaking in general.
For $20, I'll take you to a Ku Klux Klan cookout.
So a lot of people look at Live and Let Die and they go, ooh, cringe, cringe-worthy, whether it was some of the vernacular or way some of the black actors are portrayed. What's your opinion of that?
Oh, you're gonna stick me with this one, okay?
Well, I'll come in second. I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose followers.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just funny because it's a touchy subject, and it's funny. We were talking off camera before about just the things, like how the Bond films and films in general are changing because people are getting so much more sensitive to things. And one of the things that you find is that when something is said, it has a lot less to do with what's actually said as opposed to who says it. So when you
Great
deal
point.
with a subject like Blaxploitation, it again, when a Bond movie does it, it can be touchy because that was sort of a movement that came out, black filmmakers, black actors and actresses doing what they wanted to see.
Yes.
So and right, and sort of like anything else, a good idea can sometimes blossom and people will take it and run with it. Bond takes it. Now you sort of have like the whitest as white can be, trying to dip their toes in a blaxploitation film. I think a lot of it works just fine, and a lot of it is funny, and a lot of it is kind of timely. A lot of it you look back and you're like, wow. I mean, it's watching Live and Let Die sometimes has a feeling of watching All in the Family.
Here's to yesterday.
You're watching something that is very reminiscent of that time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, again, it's not for me to say if it's offensive or not. I don't mind this. I can't really think of anything in there that is particularly offensive. In fact, the J.W. Pepper character is more or less thrown in there to be the real goofball.
Yes.
To
me, that was when we were talking. It's almost like the Bond producers, the writers, knew that they were going into this particular territory, and who were the ones that they showed ignorant? It were these redneck white people that were, clearly racist, boy, and he is such a cartoon-like character that they're like, here is what bad looks like, here is what good looks like. So, and by the way, what's great about this is Bond never dips his toes into the waters of racism. I mean, Bond never plays down to the vernacular being used. He's called a couple, words and things like that during that, but he keeps, kind of that, upper lip, really nice
He's
and stiff.
unflinchingly James Bond.
He is James Bond, which I think is another movement. What I think the Bond film producers and makers do really well is they break apart the characters. So it's not all the characters representing a particular movement or style. It is individual characters that, like us, will have their own beliefs. And I think this is kind of what it showed. It showed extremes on both sides and people right squarely down the middle.
Sure.
All right. we do it in each one of these. You've already seen a couple of these. It's your first one. Welcome. We have to ask the big question. Joe Darlington, Live and Let Die. Is it Roger Moore's best James Bond film?
It's funny, as we're doing these, I'm sort of saying, does my theory really stand? Because so far...
But this is what this is about.
Right. No, I would not say that this is his best. I think later on, once they... And it's not his best because, again, I think, just like Dr. No, they're kind of getting their feet wet with the new actor. Again, getting a new Bond actor at this stage of the game was still a big deal.
Right.
Nowadays, it's kind of like, well, we're already talking about who's going to replace Daniel Craig.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's things in this film that, again, it's not quite, Roger Moore's James Bond will emerge soon. But this one is still, he's not quite sure how to play this. Like you said, he's rougher than he would normally be. In his next film, he's probably even rougher than this. And people will look back and say, that does seem weird for Roger Moore. But later on, he blossoms and becomes his own person. So yeah, I would say his best will come later. In fact...
What is his best to you?
My personal, Octopussy.
Really?
Oh yeah. What'd you think? It should be For Your Eyes Only?
No. Oh, yeah. For Your Eyes Only or Spy Who Loves Me. That's usually the two that people generally pick.
It's funny. I'm not that big on Spy Who Loved Me because I like it a lot, and there's a lot of great things about it. Yeah. And I do feel, frankly, that is really when he sort of comes in to his own, and they embrace Bond elements as opposed to not knowing how to play it. That is where he sort of comes in as his own James Bond, and it works great. Yeah. It's a little cartoony for me. My favorites are For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy. Those to me are kind of neck and neck for Roger Moore's best. For Your Eyes Only to me is great because again it's a mission that's down to earth. Excuse the pun because it was after Moonraker. They're like we got to bring it down to like Earth again. So I do think, to me, my humble opinion, Live and Let Die is my favorite. Nice. And his best. And I'll tell you what it is. I'm trying to do it like as a whole. So when I think of Roger Moore and I put him in The Spy Who Loves Me, I don't think it was his best movie because there are certain elements of the movie that I think are actually better than Live and Let Die, but I don't think him with the movie is better. Yeah. I like this Bond because just like I liked Sean Connery in Thunderball, I think that the connection between this hard-hitting, mission-oriented Bond is very clear. I love the situations. I love all the different aspects of the Bond, the music, the Bond girl, the bad guy. If I put it together as a whole, it's the one that if you had to watch in the mounds of hell, a Roger Moore movie, James Bond, over and over and over again, it would be Live and Let Die. That's interesting. It would be Live and Let Die. There is a lot to like about this movie. I mean, one of the things that we didn't even talk about that sort of goes unnoticed, there's a lot of very interesting side characters. I mean, there's a lot of... Teehee, Whisper. Your champagne! What? Would you like me to open your champagne? Yeah. The other guy that Sheriff Pepper is running down, chasing, His brother-in-law. Yeah, right. Right. There you go. Everybody wants to borrow this boat. That's great. I love that moment. So I mean, there's a lot. This is a rich film. There's a lot in here to sink your teeth into. There's a lot of great locations. Sort of almost forget, but there's Jamaica is one, New Orleans is one. I mean, they bounce around. Yeah, and it's some good stuff. So I believe me, I will not. It's a contender, but it's yeah. Again, it's not my personal favorite, but I will not knock anybody for liking this one because I think this one it really is a great film. And so it's interesting. So far, we've been through 3 of these. Only one, because it was his only film, has stood to your theory. Yeah, that's true. For me, it's 2 out of the 3, but for you, it's only 1 out of the 3. I think it happens. Let's see what happens. Yeah, next. I think going forward, I think I'll be a little more on track with it because, again, we're still in the early days. The idea of having to sort of get back to basics hasn't really happened yet. True. We're still sort of in like the hardcore just James Bond movies. I mean, this is the 8th film in the series. Yeah. We're not kind of out in the teens and 20s yet, where we have to sort of, where we sort of done everything, and now we got to bring it back in. Exactly. So yeah, we're still sort of at the ground level, and we're like the whole back to basics. We're at the basics at this point. True that. All right. So we're going to leave you, but we will return with Timothy Dalton's Living Daylights. Looking forward to it. Haven't seen that in a while, so I'm looking forward to that. This has been David Zaritsky. Joe Darlington. And we will see you very soon. See you next time.